There comes a time in a woman's life when she looks back and realizes the man she pushed away wasn't perfect, but he was rare. Not because he had money, looks, or status, but because he had consistency, loyalty, and a genuine heart. And by the time she understands his worth, he's no longer there. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the pain of losing a good man, what women realize too late. This is not about blame. It's about awareness, because sometimes realizing what you've lost doesn't hurt as much as realizing how easily you let it slip away. A good man doesn't win your heart with grand gestures or perfect words. He wins it quietly, with consistency. He shows up when he says he will. He remembers the things you mentioned in passing. He doesn't make promises to impress. He makes commitments he intends to keep. But the tragedy is that many women mistake this stability for simplicity. When something is consistent, it stops feeling exciting. When someone becomes predictable, their effort starts to blend into the background noise of daily life. The texts that once felt comforting begin to feel routine. The gestures that once felt reassuring start to feel repetitive. And slowly, without realizing it, she starts taking him for granted. She starts assuming he'll always be there, no matter how she responds. She stops matching his energy because she believes his love is unconditional. And maybe it is, but even unconditional hearts have limits. She forgets that consistency doesn't mean he doesn't feel pain. It just means he hides it well to keep peace. He doesn't argue every time she dismisses his effort, but that doesn't mean he doesn't notice. He doesn't complain when she withdraws emotionally, but that doesn't mean he isn't hurting. The good man stays, not because he's weak, but because he values loyalty more than ego. Yet one day, even the calmest soul gets tired of being unappreciated. It starts small. The texts get shorter. The calls get less frequent. The tone changes subtly. His laughter doesn't sound as full anymore. His eyes don't light up the same way. And still, she doesn't notice. She thinks he's just busy. She assumes his silence means nothing because she's grown so used to his presence that she can't imagine it disappearing. She doesn't realize that silence is the loudest cry of someone who's been too understanding for too long. He stops explaining, he stops reminding, and he starts pulling away in ways that are hard to detect until he's gone. That's when it hits her. The pattern she once called boring was actually safety. The predictability she dismissed was reliability. The steadiness she overlooked was emotional maturity. She starts to miss the messages that used to annoy her. She misses the calls that used to interrupt her scrolling. She replays moments in her mind, wondering why she couldn't see his value when he was right in front of her. And that realization cuts deep because it's not just about losing a man, it's about losing peace, stability, and the kind of love that doesn't need fixing. She begins to remember how he never made her feel small during arguments, how he apologized even when he wasn't entirely wrong, just to protect the relationship. How he always chose resolution over ego, and how easy it was to talk to him when the world felt heavy. And she realizes, maybe for the first time, that his kind of love wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, consistent, and deeply grounding. It didn't come with fireworks, but it lit her world in steady warmth. The pain of losing him doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, like echoes of what used to be. Every time she encounters someone who plays games, who lies, who disappears when things get hard, she thinks of him. Every time she faces inconsistency disguised as passion, she understands what real love actually looked like. It wasn't the butterflies or the chaos, it was the calm he brought into her life. The kind of calm that only becomes visible once it's gone. And now she sees it clearly. The consistency she once overlooked was the rarest form of love. The kind that doesn't just show up for the good days, but stands firm through the bad ones. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but deserves appreciation. The kind she didn't lose suddenly, she lost it slowly by assuming it would always stay. In today's world, where chaos often feels like passion, a woman can easily mistake peace for boredom. When she meets a man who doesn't argue for dominance, who doesn't play games, who doesn't trigger her insecurities, she starts to feel something unfamiliar. Calm. But because she's spent so long equating emotional intensity with love, she doesn't know how to handle calmness. She starts to think that something is missing. She begins to crave the highs and lows she once knew because, to her, stillness feels like emptiness. She doesn't realize that what she's experiencing isn't the absence of passion, it's the presence of emotional security. He doesn't raise his voice to prove a point. He doesn't make her question her worth. He doesn't create drama just to keep her attention. Instead, he gives her peace, and she doesn't know what to do with it. She's used to confusion, to emotional unpredictability, to the adrenaline rush of wondering where she stands. A good man doesn't give her that. He gives her consistency, reassurance, and a sense of emotional safety. But because she's conditioned to believe that love must hurt to feel real, she starts to think this calmness is too easy. So she tests him, not always intentionally, but subconsciously. She picks unnecessary arguments, she withholds affection, she challenges his patience, just to feel something. She wants to see if he'll react, if he'll fight to prove his love. But when he doesn't engage in drama, when he chooses composure over chaos, she confuses that for disinterest. What she doesn't understand is that his restraint is strength. His silence isn't indifference, it's maturity. His calmness isn't detachment, it's self-control. He's not avoiding conflict because he doesn't care. He's avoiding it because he values peace more than winning an argument. Over time, she starts to feel disconnected, not because love is fading, but because it feels unfamiliar to be with someone who doesn't trigger her emotional defenses. She starts to label him as too calm, too reserved, or even too nice. She tells herself that something feels off, that there's no spark. But that spark she's missing is actually the instability she once mistook for passion. The very thing she thought she wanted, peace, stability, emotional security, is now in front of her, but it feels uncomfortable because it doesn't match the chaos she's used to surviving. Then one day, that peace is gone. The man who used to be her emotional anchor has quietly walked away, not in anger, not in resentment, but in quiet acceptance that he cannot compete with her addiction to chaos. And suddenly she realizes how rare it was to have someone who made love feel safe. The silence that once felt dull now feels deafening. The predictability that once felt boring now feels like comfort she desperately misses. She begins to understand that excitement without security is just emotional volatility, that chemistry without stability is a storm disguised as love. She looks back and starts to see the moments she dismissed. The times he listened when she vented, the times he stayed patient when she projected her pain onto him, the times he made her feel grounded without her even noticing. And it dawns on her that real love was never supposed to feel like chaos. It was supposed to feel like home. But she mistook peace for passivity, maturity for monotony, and security for lack of spark. She confused emotional safety with emotional dullness because she didn't yet know what healthy love felt like. Now, every time she encounters someone who makes her feel those familiar highs and lows, she doesn't feel excitement. She feels exhaustion. Every time she meets someone who plays mind games, she misses the one who never did. And it's only then that she understands. The peace she once rejected was the very thing her heart had been craving all along. A good man doesn't always express love through grand gestures. Most of the time, it's through the little, consistent things he does without being asked. It's in the way he checks on her after a long day, the way he listens even when she rambles, the way he stays up late to comfort her through her breakdowns or remembers details she forgot she even mentioned. These things become so constant that she starts to see them as ordinary. She stops noticing the effort because it's always there. And that's where the unintentional neglect begins, when his consistency becomes background noise and his presence starts feeling expected instead of appreciated. She doesn't realize how much energy it takes to always be emotionally available. She doesn't see the small sacrifices, the moments he puts his own feelings aside just to make sure she's okay. She doesn't acknowledge that emotional effort is invisible labor because he doesn't complain, because he doesn't demand recognition, because he doesn't guilt trip her into gratitude. She assumes he doesn't mind. But love, even from the strongest hearts, requires emotional reciprocity. When one person keeps giving without receiving acknowledgement, their heart starts to dim. He doesn't stop caring overnight. He just starts to care quietly. At first, the silence doesn't feel alarming. She notices that he talks a little less, that he doesn't initiate as many conversations, but she assumes he's just tired or distracted. She still takes his presence for granted because she's never seen a version of him that withdraws. But what she doesn't realize is that silence is not emptiness, it's a boundary. It's the moment a man who once tried to fix everything realizes he can't fix being unappreciated. He starts to protect his energy, not because he stopped loving her, but because he finally started loving himself enough to stop explaining his worth. And that's when it hits her. The messages that once filled her day are no longer there. The voice that used to calm her in moments of chaos has faded. The emotional presence she once depended on is missing, and the silence becomes unbearable. Suddenly, she starts to remember all the ways he showed up for her. She replays moments where he comforted her, supported her, encouraged her, and made her feel like she wasn't alone. And she realizes how effortless he made love look. She realizes how deeply he cared without ever making her feel indebted. Now she starts to understand that the smallest efforts, the morning messages, the random calls, the gentle reminders, were all expressions of love. She starts to see how much emotional weight he carried in silence. The things she used to overlook now echo in her mind, and every act of care feels heavier in hindsight. She begins to recognize that his attention wasn't a habit. It was devotion. His consistency wasn't routine, it was emotional investment. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from losing someone. It comes from realizing what you lost after being exposed to everything that isn't real. When she moves on and starts meeting new people, she tells herself she's ready to start fresh. She believes the world is full of possibilities, that maybe someone new will make her feel the same way again. But what she doesn't know is that every new connection will quietly remind her of the authenticity she once had and didn't value. Because when you've had something pure, everything fake becomes painfully obvious. At first, the new faces seem charming. They know what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. They give attention that feels exciting, compliments that sound flattering, and promises that seem convincing. But slowly, she starts to feel the difference. The man she lost never needed to perform love. He lived it. His words matched his actions, and his affection wasn't a strategy. It was a reflection of who he was. These new people, however, are different. Their words are full of intensity, but their actions lack consistency. They know how to start a story, but they don't know how to stay in one. She begins to see the contrast in the smallest things. The good man used to notice her moods without her saying a word. He paid attention to details, how her tone changed when she was upset, how her eyes shifted when something was wrong. The pretenders only notice when it benefits them. They don't care about her silence, they only care when her silence affects their attention. The difference between genuine love and imitation becomes clear in how present someone is when there's nothing to gain. And every time she experiences that emptiness behind fake affection, her heart remembers the warmth of real care. She recalls how he never made her beg for reassurance, never made her doubt his intentions. He didn't play mind games to keep her interested. His love didn't come with manipulation or emotional confusion. It came with effort, with honesty, with the kind of presence that made her feel seen even in her quietest moments. The pretenders, on the other hand, love only when it's convenient. They chase validation, not connection. They disappear when things get hard, only to return when it's easy again. And each time she meets one of them, she realizes that the love she lost wasn't ordinary, it was exceptional. The irony is that she once thought she could do better. She believed she needed more excitement, more passion, more spark. But now she understands that what she really needed was depth, the kind of depth that doesn't fade after the honeymoon phase, that doesn't crumble under pressure, that doesn't disappear when she stops being perfect. She starts to see how rare it is to find someone who loves you when you're not lovable, who stays when you're difficult, who doesn't walk away the moment you stop entertaining them. That's when the regret starts to settle in. Not just because she lost him, but because she failed to recognize him. The world starts to look different after losing something real. Every compliment feels rehearsed, every gesture feels transactional, every promise feels hollow. She starts to crave that genuine energy again, the kind that didn't demand attention, that didn't feel like a performance, that didn't come and go with convenience. And in that craving, she realizes the truth. She wasn't unlucky in love. She was careless with something authentic. The pain deepens when she understands that the good man didn't love her because she was perfect. He loved her because he saw her, flaws, moods, insecurities, and all, and still chose to stay. The pretenders only love the version of her that benefits them. They adore her strength but mock her vulnerability. They admire her confidence but can't handle her depth. And as she compares, not out of choice but through experience, she learns that genuine love never demands proof. It offers presence. It doesn't speak the loudest, it stays the longest. And the ones who come after him only highlight how rare his kind of love truly was. There's a moment every woman faces when she looks back at the relationship she lost and realizes it wasn't love that failed, it was pride. The inability to admit when she was wrong, the habit of always needing to win arguments, and the fear of vulnerability disguised as strength. For a long time, she believed that being right was more important than being kind, that holding her ground meant she was powerful. But with time, she begins to see that real power isn't about dominance, it's about humility. It's about having the courage to say, I hurt you and I shouldn't have. When she was with a good man, she mistook his patience for weakness. He apologized first, not because he was always wrong, but because he valued peace over ego. She, on the other hand, saw apologies as surrender. She thought staying silent meant losing control, so she argued harder, defended longer, and justified everything, even when she knew she'd gone too far. It wasn't malice, it was pride. The kind of pride that whispers, if you bend, you'll break. But she didn't realize that love bends all the time. It bends to understand, to heal, to meet halfway. The only thing that breaks love is ego. It takes losing someone patient to understand the cost of pride. Because when the silence replaces the conversations and the distance replaces the closeness, she starts to see how many battles she won that destroyed the peace. She remembers the moments he tried to reach out after an argument, the times he wanted to talk things through, but she shut him down. She thought walking away would make her feel powerful. Instead, it left her feeling empty. Ego gives a false sense of control. It makes you feel like you're protecting yourself when in reality you're building walls that keep love out. With time, she starts meeting people who mirror her energy, people who also choose ego over connection. And suddenly, she experiences what he once felt, trying to reason with someone who refuses to listen, trying to build with someone who needs to be right instead of being real. That's when humility starts to make sense. She realizes that being soft isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That saying, I'm sorry, doesn't make you smaller, it makes you emotionally intelligent. She starts to understand that growth has nothing to do with proving your worth to others and everything to do with managing your pride. The painful truth is she lost someone who wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for partnership, someone he could build with, not battle with. He didn't need her to always agree. He just needed her to understand. But she was too busy defending her pride to see his effort. Now, when she remembers how he used to handle conflicts, she realizes he was teaching her emotional maturity without ever saying a word. He showed her that love isn't about winning, it's about protecting the connection. And that's something ego can never do. She begins to see that relationships don't end because of lack of love. They end because of lack of humility, because someone, somewhere, decides their pride is more valuable than their partner's peace. She remembers all the times she chose silence over apology, distance over vulnerability, and defense over empathy. Those choices didn't make her strong, they made her unreachable. And when the man who once tried so hard to bridge the gap finally stopped trying, she realized humility wasn't about losing dignity, it was about preserving love. Now, when she looks back, she understands that maturity isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about managing them. It's about understanding that I'm sorry is not a sign of defeat, but a declaration of care. She learns that being humble doesn't make her weak. It makes her human. And sometimes, the hardest lesson love teaches is that the biggest enemy of peace isn't another person. It's the ego we refuse to let go of. There comes a point when the pain of losing a good man stops feeling like heartbreak and starts feeling like awakening. In the beginning, it hurts deeply. The emptiness, the regret, the silence, it all feels unbearable. She tells herself it's unfair, that maybe she didn't deserve this kind of loss. But slowly, as time passes and the noise in her head begins to quiet down, she starts to see the truth. Losing him wasn't punishment. It was life's way of showing her what she refused to learn any other way. Some lessons only make sense when you lose what you took for granted. When she had him, she didn't truly see him. Not because she didn't care, but because she wasn't ready to value consistency, patience, and loyalty. She mistook emotional safety for comfort and effort for expectation. She wanted excitement, validation, something that fed her ego instead of her soul. But when he left, the silence forced her to face herself. She could no longer hide behind excuses or blame. The loss became a mirror, reflecting every pattern, every insecurity, every fear she ignored. And for the first time, she saw how much of what she called love was actually her need for control and reassurance. The pain didn't just come from his absence. It came from realizing how much she contributed to it. It came from recognizing how many opportunities she had to love better, but chose not to. It came from understanding that sometimes life takes away what's good for you to realize what's wrong within you. And that realization doesn't come easy. It's uncomfortable, humbling, and deeply transformative, but it's necessary because until she faces that truth, she'll keep repeating the same mistakes with different faces. At first, she wishes he'd come back. She replays conversations in her mind, imagines how things could have been if she had just listened more, apologized sooner, or loved deeper. But eventually, she stops wishing for him and starts wishing for healing. She begins to understand that his departure wasn't meant to break her, it was meant to build her, to remind her that growth doesn't happen in comfort zones and peace doesn't come from someone else fixing you. It comes from learning to fix yourself. His absence became the space where her self-awareness was born. She starts to see how his patience was teaching her self-control, how his calmness was showing her emotional maturity, and how his loyalty was modeling the kind of love she should also learn to give, not just expect. But those lessons only make sense now when he's no longer there to repeat them. And that's how growth works. It rarely happens in the moment. It happens in reflection. Losing him gave her the distance she needed to finally understand what love is supposed to feel like. Not chaotic, not demanding, not conditional, but peaceful and grounding. With time, she stops seeing him as the one that got away and starts seeing him as the one who made her see. The one whose departure forced her to confront her own flaws, to grow into someone capable of loving right. She realizes that sometimes you don't lose a good person because you're cursed. You lose them because life is teaching you accountability, because you can't appreciate real love if you've never faced the parts of yourself that destroy it. The pain lingers, yes, but it evolves. It turns into gratitude, not because losing him was easy, but because it woke her up. She learns that growth doesn't always come with comfort. Sometimes it comes with loss. And though she can't change the past, she can change what kind of woman she becomes because of it. The woman who once chased validation now seeks peace. The woman who once acted out of ego now leads with empathy. And the woman who once lost something real now understands that it wasn't punishment. It was preparation for a version of herself who finally knows what love truly requires. In the end, what she once called heartbreak becomes her greatest teacher. Losing a good man stripped away her illusions and forced her to see the truth about love, maturity, and herself. It taught her that peace isn't boring, that effort isn't weakness, and that humility is far more powerful than pride. She learned that love isn't about finding perfection. It's about recognizing sincerity before it's gone. And while she can't undo the past, she now carries the wisdom to never repeat it. The pain that once broke her has quietly shaped her into a woman who finally understands the value of a good man and the responsibility of keeping one.